Hello and welcome. Today we're going to do some editing, and I wasn't planning to make a screen record video, but since I'm switching topics and going into the topic of the right brain as it relates to mania, bipolar crisis, the world crisis, I thought that I would just sort of talk through some of it because from past experience, it helps me to vocalize things. I have read that when editing, it's good to read it out loud, so then it's easier to read it word for word, but just sort of talk about it in general. The purpose of a video is to have a bit of a dialogue with what I've written in order to have that as another way for my brain to process the information. So then when I am editing it, which I might do some of, but not completely, then it'll be a little bit different than if I didn't do this process. And also thought to just share my writing process again. And oddly enough, even though I've been sort of channeling and writing since 2011, when I had my first crisis and I was diagnosed bipolar, which has a lot of superpowers, including words and writing. It's just now that I actually feel like I would like to work on my writing, on writing itself, the ability to write a post, write a book, or whatever. And that being said, I've written lots of posts. I've also laid that into a book or something. Now I just have all the content in here. And then I have the articles that I haven't posted yet, or I've posted these, but the ones I haven't yet, I just keep track by putting post in front of them. So on Tuesday, a couple days ago, I wrote these. Some of them were already written, I think, like this placebo one. And so I did quite a lot of writing. I wrote all day long. And I'm finding that, at least lately, being able to get into a day-long writing process, which usually isn't all day, but it was on Tuesday. And then doing a different day where it's the editing and posting, because those are two different activities, and just being in the flow with writing. That's why I wrote like three posts or 2.5 posts, and then didn't do any editing, instead of being like, okay, I finished one post, I'm going to edit it and post it. I could do that, but I find it easier. I'm just learning more recently that it's easier to do those activities separately. The document where they were supposed to be books, I had like book 3 to 11, as you can see. And now I just have book 3, 11, 7, and those are, and then the finished one. And then, of course, different genre of writing, which is like poetry and possible lyrics and spoken word and things like that, which I haven't really been harvesting, but I did spend a day doing that. So when I go to book 3, I have all this content that I need to finish, all these different topics. So there's 99,000 words here. And then in the finished one, there is 95,000. And I also, book 7, I don't have it open because it keeps slowing down my computer and I get the spinning beach ball. So it starts to frustrate me when my technology is like not able to keep up with how I want to keep all these documents open in order to just quickly search them or whatever. So I find that when I plug my computer into the power, it doesn't really do it. I would say 4 or 5 years. So I guess it is getting a bit old. It's just not keeping up with me. It's not too old. It's just not keeping up with me. So, this, I was writing a bunch of stuff on cognitive biases, and then I'm going to get into talking about the specific biases related to mania and bipolar. as a bit of an experiment. Actually, this next part isn't that. This next article that I need to write, I started on it and I found it really interesting about some studies they did about like learning and belief updating and how that can lead to less time or more time in euthymia, which apparently means like kind of a balanced state. I'm not really big on the illness term, so I wasn't really using that one. Though now that I think about it, I spend most of the time in euthymia and attribute that to learning. A lot of it I attribute to learning from some scientific facts or quotes from Human Potential that relate to my experiences. So I didn't like read the science, have all these quotes, and then have an experience of mania or crisis and then think, oh, I have all these points and they just completely relate to mania. I had lots of insights and experiences. And then as I read and learn through YouTube or scientific papers or whatever, I see my experiences everywhere in the Human Potential and frontiers of science and academic literature, but it's not applied to people like me who get a diagnosis of bipolar. For that, we're supposed to just like look at the DSM and read all this like illness literature, but a lot of it is in the Human Potential. And some people who have a diagnosis say, well, it was a spiritual experience. Well, that's one thing, but it's also in the science. And all these different points related to spiritual or meaningful or extraordinary experiences. So take this for example. It says Dr. Iain McGilchrist, who wrote a huge book on the right brain and how important it is and how it's devalued by society and the implications of that. He says, in ordinary experience, we don't feel that we're in two different worlds, but if ordinary. He doesn't say it, but you can imply by reading this that the other one is extraordinary. And then you can imply that, hey, wait, I had an extraordinary or non-ordinary experience. And then by that, you can say, perhaps it has something to do with the right brain or the whole brain, or, accessing a little bit of the right brain, or even just the left brain quieting down somewhat. We don't know exactly. Maybe if I read that whole book, I would know more. But again, it's not a book on bipolar. He specifically, and actually it's not a book on, it's a book on ordinary brains, and how they use the left brain mostly and the right brain and what it could be. He said the non-ordinary things are beyond the scope of his book. So that's why I use some quotes from his book to be like, well, these actually apply to extraordinary states. And so you can say there's ordinary consciousness, which is left brain dominant, like mostly left brain. And those people that he's speaking to have not had an extraordinary experience of a prolonged nature. Maybe they have done an extraordinary experience. I'm speaking to those of us who have. And if the extraordinary is in the right brain, then it could be that we're accessing the right brain. And if I were to go back and like read everything I've written so far, like actually like written into posts and my books, I could probably replace some of the terms like just with like right brain and simplify it that way rather than being like it's this and it's that and using all these metaphors. It's probably the right brain that can make all the metaphors, right? So a lot of the content I would say is of the right brain attempting to justify itself. It's almost like screaming at the top of its lungs like, hello, there's some other aspect to us that the limitations of academia can't actually see. Like it denies it, right? So another part of this is like hopefully encouraging you to write too. And even if it takes 10 years to get to a point where you want to learn how to write better, which I'm just getting to now, or perhaps you're a great writer already and you don't necessarily explore some of this non-ordinary or extraordinary content or experience from this framework of like, what is it all about? For me, in a way, it's like the right to put the left brain in its proper place in daily life, um, and hopefully integrate to a point where this big transformative crisis event is not that necessary anymore, because so much of the right brain and whatever is integrated. You can say, oh, higher self, etc., etc. Well, the higher self could be processed by the right brain. I'm not saying it's in the right brain, or it's reduced to the brain. It's that the right brain is the facilitator of bringing that into conscious awareness. So here I am saying all these other things that I didn't say in the article. That's fine. So anyways, the process of writing, again, I have like my notes are full of things as well. And that's how I just keep track of random bits. But I haven't had so much of that coming through lately, which is good. And then the document that has a lot of more insights to talk about eventually, which is here it is, book 7. So this one has like 180,000 words, right? Some of it is like excerpts from science. I know this isn't the best way to keep track of things. Like nowadays, there are ways to highlight things, but I haven't gone about it that way so far. And to that point, this stuff I wrote in probably 2020 and 2021. So all of this, book 3, book 11, book 7, which is all needing to be written, is old. And part of my goal is to catch up to some degree, maybe not on every single thing, but on enough to have updated my consciousness with how my consciousness was trying to update itself. So I'm still years behind, right? Like if I had all that written out and integrated and maybe gone over again to get the essential points and fundamentals, then I'd be in a different place than I am now, where it's like, oh, I'm just starting to kind of enjoy writing to the point that I want to get a little bit better at it. And like I said, I was writing a bunch of books, and then when ChatGPT came out, I was like, well, maybe there's no point in writing books. And then now I feel like I could write a book again at some point when I feel my writing skills are good enough to do so. Because before I wrote them, even though I wasn't necessarily a good enough writer, though I wasn't a great writer with my books, I learned how to self-publish books to the point where I can do every single step except for the interior design of the book, which makes it look nice. And that's for a print book. I can do all the steps of self-publishing, like a Kindle book onto Amazon. So that's a good skill to have, right? Like I could publish a book tomorrow if I wanted to. And again, for me, since I'm not the greatest writer and I'm still catching up in consciousness, I don't generally like market the books or really talk about that I've even written them, because I just don't think I have it sorted enough. For example, when I started to learn about the right brain and it just started to make things fall into place, like, why didn't I see this all along? But I guess in this piece I did now, which I was able to write about the right brain, but with stuff that I wrote years ago. So stuff I wrote 3 or 4 years ago, now being written with this lens of the right brain, is making this stuff I wrote 4 years ago more relevant than it would have been had I written something with it that time ago. So the delay isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I also realize that I want to learn to write well, even though there's ChatGPT, right? So that kind of was like, maybe learning to write isn't really necessary. But I tested it out enough to know that at this point, at least, it's not really that useful. for what I'm doing, because a lot of this is sort of like original ideas or original, making notes about that or insights that come through, and then over time finding the academic insights that extrapolate to that. So it's like creating a bridge between like each insight or experience, as many as possible, and science. So it's like bridging the right brain experience with the left brain insights from, empirical study, instead of just saying, oh, it's moods, oh, it's bad, oh, it's good, oh, it's mania. These are just very nebulous terms that don't really get to all the nuances of the experience, right? So take the example of a dream journal or a dream guide. What do they call that? When they have a list of all the things you can see or experience in a dream, and to say science or human potential. And in that way, there's a bigger map for myself, and then others can extrapolate to their own experiences and even be like, well, that's not how I experience it, or that doesn't make sense. But then it gets us all thinking about how we want to weave or what we want to weave in. And even say somebody reads these posts on the right brain, like 3 posts, and they're like, actually, I don't like that metaphor, or I don't even believe in the brain, or I don't know, whatever it is. But at the same time, it's about inviting the process of learning and understanding for ourselves, because we already were and are, but then we go to, say, a psychiatrist, and we're just told, oh no, it's just that, or we're told that it's whatever, or we can't even talk analyzing our dreams. We can analyze our own experiences and find parallels wherever we want, including things that aren't the illness paradigm. We can find it from metaphors or stories in movies. Like, we can find it wherever. Just these posts, I'm going into the right brain. And I think it's a really helpful pivot point, because of how there are people saying, well, the right brain's the answer. And then what I'm saying is, well, we're accessing the right brain. And yeah, it comes as a crisis. It's not like, oh, all of a sudden we experience this totally different dimension of our existence, which we don't generally access, which is our right brain in what I'm talking about here. And it's just like the same as usual and easy. No, it's going to be a major challenge, completely different way of seeing the world. It's going to be a major challenge. So, inviting you to explore for yourself whatever metaphors, because the thing is that each exploration or each extrapolation or each moment of understanding is meaning that you see for yourself. You can feel it, and putting that into words and sharing it with someone else can be a challenge. And then sometimes that's not how others would see it anyway. So it's kind of a thing that is for ourselves, like this ability to generate and see meaning. And I think that process can become very refined to the point where we're not necessarily making these huge leaps in meaning that can get us, they're able to hone that in a certain way. Like, for example, when I have huge leaps in meaning, like that could be like, say, prophecy or paranoia or something, I'm like, okay, that would make a good movie. And I write that down in a different note that is all these different movie ideas. And maybe one day when I catch up on this that I'm doing, I'll write a movie script. And so that's an example of that. Instead of being like, oh my gosh, I need to go like stand on this mountain because these aliens are coming tomorrow, I'd be like, let me write this down that I could put this in the movie. There's a scene where I stand on the mountains, or whoever stands on the mountains waiting for the alien, things like that. And then the other thing is like the progression of writing in general. So like I said, when it first started, my writing started like this. Where is it? Here it is. I wrote this document here is well, this one's 40 pages, but there's a bunch of these documents because I scanned them into a PDF. So it was about, I think it was 700 pages. But I write, when I'm on the iPhone, etc., it speeds me up. If I'm dancing to music, it's fine. I must stay at the correct speed. Listening to music is okay. If I'm dancing, listening to music is okay if I'm dancing. Otherwise, I guess it was kind of messing with me. Watching words are creative. So that's when I started like scribbling down these things. And at this point, it's like, okay, obviously I'm in a different kind of world where I'm sensing things differently. And, it's almost like, say I start to have dizziness, and then I'm like, oh, if I run, I don't feel dizzy. Or if I ice skate, I don't feel dizzy. But when I'm walking, I feel, well, it's a bit stuck. And here's another example. What is observe your fact? I go speeding to the future, and if I slow down, things break and bills come. So it was like this process of speeding up into like this other world that, Dr. Iain McGilchrist talks about. And then all of a sudden it shifts back and I slow down, like slow down back into the left brain. And then things break, like actually items break. And then there's like a bill in the mail. So there's like this world of, of matter. And then there's this world of light. I'm just saying that from my experience. And then the noise is what is, can go to the future, etc., with words, etc. The noise is what is. It's hard to be around. So, that from the new experience of the other side of the brain, the left brain side was experienced as noisy. So I'm not saying like in a crisis you're not experiencing those. And I would write insights as well, but this just shows like in the beginning I was just figuring out how to walk and how to stand and how to be in the noise and all that. And so one day I want to go through this and kind of publish it in some way, because the books that I've written, which I just put up here for now, is kind of a progression as well. So first I wrote this one, The Bipolar Game Changer. And then I wrote, I think it was this one here, Beyond Bipolar. So these are a bunch of insights that I wrote when I started to write them when I had a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. So it's kind of like this is book one, these scribbles here, that 700 pages worth. Then Beyond Bipolar Disorder. So it's like little reflections of points of insights. A lot of it is about, actually, I don't even know if I'd had a relapse during these insights, but I was just really based on the fear of psychosis and some of mania. And then the next one that I wrote is Bipolar Intermediate, which is years 3 to 6 in blogs. So actually, I think I need to change this. I wrote The Bipolar Game Changer, then book 2, which is Beyond Bipolar Disorder, or no, Bipolar Disorder and Human Potential. Then I felt the need to go backwards. So this is kind of, I would say this is book B. This Bipolar Intermediate is book C. And this book